There are worlds that remember the Emperor's light only as ash drifting through a dead sky, their names erased from star charts, their atmospheres boiled away by fire that fell from orbit, their oceans turned to glass beneath the wrath of mankind's own hand. Exterminatus, the final word of judgment. A decree that no soul, no spore, no atom of corruption shall remain. Yet amid the silence, there lingers a question that gnaws at the minds of those few who have witnessed it. What becomes of a world after it dies by the Imperium's command? What stories are buried beneath vitrified plains and dust, that once bore cities devoted to the throne? In the echoing gulf between faith and annihilation, memory burns slower than Prometheum, and it is there that the truth festers, through the void's cold whisper. You can almost hear a theater vox recording distorted by centuries of static, the voice of a doomed commander confessing to the stars. If you listen long enough, you will feel the pulse of those lost worlds, faint but unyielding, beating beneath the surface of damnation. If this tale of ruin and revelation stirs something within you, you wish to wander deeper into the hollow carcasses of dead planets and glimpse what the Imperium dares not name, then remain with me. Let this chronicle find strength in your watchful eyes. Like, share, and bind your faith to this transmission, so that the echoes of Exterminatus may never fade into the black. There is no dawn after the light that comes is not born of stars, but of fire that has already burned itself out. The world beneath me, if it can still be called that, lies unmoving, as though reality itself has grown tired. The horizon is no longer a line but a wound, split open by bombardment and stitched together again by ash. I walk through the skeleton of what was once a hive spire, its bones rising in crooked silhouette against a sky the color of dried blood. Wind carries glass dust that cuts against the filters of my rebreather. Each breath is a prayer for endurance, a defiance against the silence that presses in from all sides. The vox crackles sometimes, though nothing speaks. Fragments of data flicker across the slate on my wrist, heat signatures that are not heat, movement readings that vanish when I turn to look. There are whispers that some echoes of the dead remain, that Exterminatus does not end life so much as confuse it. The mind of the world convulses when it dies. I do not know if such things are heresy or truth. Out here, truth and heresy have been buried in the same grave. Once I was a man of the Astra Militarum, the 117th Cadian to be exact, though the regiment itself no longer exists. I survived a siege that lasted 30 standard days, only to be ordered to evacuate so the Inquisition could burn the sky. It was not treachery, it was necessity, or so we were told. The taint of the warp had routed deep beneath the hives, and purgation by fire was the only path left. Now, I serve as an auxiliary observer under the Adeptus Mechanicus, tasked with documenting residual effects of total planetary cleansing. They call me observer, but I am only a witness to the corpse of a world that once prayed to the same emperor I do. The ground cracks beneath my boots. What was once ferrocrete has melted into a translucent crust, an ocean frozen mid. Through its fractures, a faint glow pulses residual radiation or the death throes of energy weapons unleashed in orbit. My auspex tells me the readings are unstable, but I remain. The Mogos overseeing this survey wishes to recover machine spirits buried beneath the slag. I am told the spirits still scream, demanding purpose. I sometimes wonder if the Magos hears the same cries I did, muffled through layers of static and glass. There are no corpses here, only shadows. Vaporized silhouettes etched into walls, entire crowds burned into permanence by the first wave of virus bombs. When I close my eyes, I imagine their last moments, the breath catching in their throats as the atmosphere ignited, lungs turning to fire, bones becoming memory. The inquisitorial records say their deaths were swift, merciful even, but nothing about this place feels merciful. Mercy would mean remembrance. Here even memory is burned away. I found what might once have been a shrine to the Emperor. Only the statue's feet remain, fused into the floor, molten gold streaked with soot. Around it lie melted prayer scrolls, their words unreadable yet still clinging to the stone as if begging to be heard. I knelt there for a moment, out of instinct rather than faith. The Ecclesiarchy teaches that the Emperor's light reaches even the darkest corners of the galaxy. Yet in this place, his light feels like the fire that ended it. Perhaps that is the point. Perhaps his mercy is indistinguishable from destruction. Night does not fall here. The sky remains a dim, endless red, stained by the ghosts of 1,000 detonations. Above, the orbiting remains of Exterminatus vessels drift silently, their trajectories decaying, their weapon bays long emptied. The cyclonic torpedoes they unleashed have done their work. Now the ships linger as tombs for their own crews, waiting for gravity to claim them. I once thought of orbit as salvation, but there is no safety up there either, only another kind of silence. On the third day, we found remnants of a manufactorum half buried beneath a slope of fused glass. The servitors set to work, their limbs blackened by radiation, their vox grills muttering litanies of maintenance as they tore through debris. They do not question. They do not tire. Their persistence is terrifying. The Magos believes the data cores within the manufactorum might hold information on pre-Exterminatus conditions avoidance of what the Inquisitor sought to destroy. I do not ask what that was. Knowledge, in the Imperium, is as lethal as any weapon. The heat is constant, like a fever that never breaks. I've stopped removing my helm even in temporary shelters. The air is thick with particulates that settle on the skin like a fine powder of death. One of the Skittery who accompanied us collapsed earlier, his augmetic limbs twitching as his organic components failed. The Magos did not pause. He ordered the servitors to repurpose the fallen's parts before the corpse cooled. Out here, everything is repurposed. Even the dead served art at times. I think I see shapes moving in the distance, figures walking where no life could stand. I tell myself it is heat distortion, reflections across the vitrified plane. But there is one shape that returns again and again. A tall, thin silhouette standing at the edge of sight. It does not approach, it does not vanish. It merely watches. When I mentioned it to the Mogos, he dismissed it as residual nerve trauma, a hallucination born from environmental exposure. Yet I am not the only one who has seen it. One of the servitors ceased its work to stare into the distance, its mechanical limbs frozen mid. When we examined its visual feed, the image was gone only static. There is no sound here, save the crunch of glass and the faint hum of machine prayers. Even the wind seems unwilling to disturb this grave. But at night, when the temperature drops and the crust cracks under thermal stress, there comes a sound like distant weeping. It rises through the fractures, echoing through the void. The first time I heard it, I thought it was gas escaping. Now I am not so sure. The sound carries patterns, rhythm, almost language. On the fifth day, we uncovered a chamber sealed beneath the It was a vault, its adamantium doors warped by heat but still intact. Inside were hundreds of canisters, some shattered, some whole, each bearing the sigil of the Officio Met. The Mogos forbade anyone to open them until decontamination protocols were complete, but the servitors were faster than our caution. One broke the seal, and within seconds, the air shimmered. Spores glittered like dust motes in the light. I expected death. Instead, there was nothing, no alarms, no decay, no growth. The spores drifted, shimmered, and vanished. The Magos called it a curiosity. I called it impossible. The vox crackled again that night. Through static came a voice, fragmented, layered over itself like echoes in a tunnel. The words were barely discernible, but I caught fragments. We endure, for his light, then silence. When I replayed the recording, the voice was gone. The data slate listed the signal origin as local no more than a kilometer away, yet the coordinates led us to a crater, its center fused into perfect glass. We found no transmitter, no device, nothing capable of sending such a signal. The Mogos grows restless. Each discovery fuels his hunger for deeper excavation. He speaks of machine spirits in pain, of the need to retrieve their memories before entropy consumes them. I wonder if it is the machine spirits calling, or something else wearing their voices. At night, I dream of the tall silhouette watching from the horizon, its eyes twin sparks of blue-white light. In my dreams, it speaks in binary hymns that my mind translates into words I cannot forget. The flesh is the flame. The world remembers. The following morning, one of the servitors was missing. We found its trail leading toward the horizon, its heavy limbs leaving deep impressions in the molten ground. The trail ended abruptly at the edge of a fissure. Looking down, I saw light flickering far below, pulsing like the heartbeat of a buried star. The Mogos insisted we descend, but the radiation readings were beyond tolerance. He ignored them. He always does. I remained at the surface, watching his red-robed figure disappear into the depths, surrounded by his mechanical entourage. Hours passed before his vox returned. His voice was trembling not with fear, but awe. It lives, he whispered. The world still lives. That was 2 days ago. We have heard nothing since. The fissure now glows brighter, its pulse faster, synchronized with the vibrations underfoot. I think the planet breathes. I think the Exterminatus burned its body but not its soul. Whatever that means for a world, I do not know. The U-Specs detects seismic fluctuations that defy known patterns, too regular, too deliberate. The servitors left behind have ceased their tasks, their systems locked in recursive loops. Repeating fragments of the litany of endurance, I sit now beside the shattered shrine. writing these words into my slate, though I doubt they will ever be read. The red sky flickers with lightning that has no storm. The air smells of ozone and iron. I can feel warmth rising from the ground, as if something immense were stirring beneath. I think of the billions who died here, how their souls were offered to the Emperor in cleansing flame. But if their essence lingers, if the world still remembers, then what have we truly destroyed? There is movement on the horizon again. The tall silhouette stands closer now, its shape clearer against the crimson haze. It is not human. Its frame is too thin, its motion too fluid, its gaze too knowing. I do not flee. There is nowhere left to go. Perhaps it is a remnant of the past. Perhaps a ghost made from data and radiation. Perhaps judgment itself. I only know that as it draws near, the static in my vox grows louder. Forming a pattern, I recognize a hymn once sung before battle. The Cadian march of faith. The fissure behind me widens with a sound like tearing metal. Heat surges upward, and the light from below flares until it blinds me. The world shudders. The silhouette raises a hand, and for an instant, I feel peace. Not mercy, never mercy, but understanding. If these are my last words, let them stand as witness. Exterminatus does not end a world. It changes it. The fire consumes the flesh, but the spirit endures, reshaped, unbound. Somewhere in the Emperor's domain, perhaps even he hears the echo of what we have done. The silence is not empty. It is waiting. The ash begins to fall again, soft as snow, covering the ground in layers of memory. I close my eyes and let it rest upon my helm. The hum beneath my feet steadies into rhythm, a heartbeat I no longer fear. Whatever comes next will not be of man's making. It will be something older, something inevitable. The light swells. My vox fills with whispers, voices upon voices, billions speaking as one. We endure, they say. We endure for his light. Then the world opens, and the silence consumes everything. Before there was silence, there was the roar of the Emperor's fire. It began with a single order, uttered without tremor, transmitted through encrypted vox channels that stretched from orbit to the very heart of the dying world. The words themselves were simple, an invocation of authority so absolute that even the stars seemed to recoil. Exterminatus. Those two syllables carried more weight than any bombardment, for they bore the judgment of mankind's God. Emperor, spoken through the mouth of his chosen servants, and once spoken, no power could recall them. From the bridge of the strike cruiser Lament of Halcyon, Inquisitor erased, Vaughn watched the world below dissolve into madness. The planet once called Atius, now marked only as obscured, had been a thriving hive world, its manufacturer feeding the engines of the segmentum obscure. But beneath the industry and devotion, corruption had spread like oil through water. Arsenos contagion, they called it. At first, biological contamination traced to a downed orc vessel. Yet what they found in the underhive had nothing to do with orcs, or with any known breed of alien. It was older, smarter. The Magi biologists whispered words that made even the Inquisition uneasy. Necrodamus. Resonance fields. Self-assembling constructs. Words that should never have been uttered within Imperial borders. Vaughn stood unmoving, hands clasped behind his back, the light of the tactical hololiths painting his gaunt face in shades of crimson and cobalt. He was a man born for war, yet weary of its necessity. The command deck buzzed with subdued tensions, skittery relaying targeting coordinates, tech priests chanting binary litanies as cyclonic torpedoes armed themselves for descent. The servitors along the walls moved in perfect rhythm, their human remnants long buried beneath steel and code. Vaughn did not see them as men, nor as tools. To him they were the mirror of the Imperium itself, sacrifice made into function, devotion reforged into obedience. Confirm weapon readiness, he said quietly. His voice carried more weight than a shout. Cyclonic payloads primed, atmospheric vectors stable, virus ordnance at 74% efficiency, replied Margot's Nethra, her vox augments translating her mechanical intonations into flat monitor. Planetary population density remains beyond control thresholds. Probability of reinfection 100%. Vaughn inclined his head slightly. Then we end it. The Vox officer hesitated before voicing the confirmation code. There was a moment, a single heartbeat where humanity attempted to resist inevitability. Then the machine took over, and the bridge filled with sound, gears turning, relays locking, the shriek of void shields compensating for the energy surge. Through the viewing aperture, Vaughn watched as the torpedo tubes ignited, hurling death toward the surface below. Each torpedo carried within it the wrath of the Imperium distilled into steel and fire. Virus bombs to strip the air of oxygen and flesh alike. Cyclonic warheads to ignite the atmosphere itself. magma bombs to crack the crust open like an egg. It was not destruction, it was purification, rendered holy through obedience. And as the first payload struck, the world answered with silence, followed by flame. From orbit, Vethra Tertius became a halo of light, clouds evaporating in concentric rings as the virus spread. The contagion was alive for mere minutes, devouring organic matter faster than thought, leaving behind oceans of vaporized fat and carbon soot. Then came ignition. The firestorm swept the planet in a single breath, and billions of voices were silenced as one. Vaughn watched without blinking. He had seen worlds die before, had ordered it before, but each time, something within him eroded. The Emperor's work demanded sacrifice, and the greatest sacrifice of all was the soul's capacity to feel. He clung to the memory of purpose as a drowning man clings to flotsam. Duty was all that remained when compassion had burned away. Exterminatus complete, intoned Magos Nethra. Planetary life signs, null. Atmospheric integrity, breached. Estimated surface temperature, 8,000 degrees and rising, market, Vaughn said. By his will, it is done. The crew bowed their heads, some murmuring fragments of the litany of cleansing. Only one man did not speak, the helmsman, a young officer whose hands shook as he adjusted the cruiser's orbit. Vaughn saw it. Fear, guilt, the human weakness that lingered even after the deed was done. He approached, placing a gloved hand on the man's shoulder. You question my order. The helmsman swallowed, his throat dry. No, my lord. I only wonder if they knew. If they had time to pray. They had all the time they needed, Vaughn replied, and more mercy than they deserved. Doubt is the first heresy, Lieutenant. It breeds decay. You would do well to remember that. The helmsman nodded, unable to meet his gaze. Vaughn returned to the viewport, watching the light fade from the dying world. Yet behind his words something else stirred a thought unspoken. Were they truly cleansed? Or had he merely silenced what he did not understand? Hours passed. The flames dimmed. The planet cooled from incandescence to a dull rust-red glow. Fragments of cities still burned like dying embers beneath the haze. Across the void, the fleet began to withdraw, engines igniting one by one as the Inquisition's decree was fulfilled. But the lament of Halcyon lingered, its course holding steady above the northern hemisphere. Remaining assets, Vaughn said. 2 retrieval craft and 1 monitoring servitor remain in orbit, Magos Nethra replied. Awaiting disposal or retasking, deploy them. I want confirmation of total eradication, she hesitated. Pause rare for a Mechanicus mind. Atmospheric descent at this stage is unwise. Conditions exceed survival thresholds. Then send the record everything. I will see the proof with my own eyes. Moments later, a small capsule detached from the cruiser's underbelly, plunging toward the planet's surface like a falling star. Through its lens feed, the Inquisitor watched as fire gave way to shadow, clouds of soot thick enough to blot out the stars. The servitor descended through storms of glass rain, its outer plating pitted by debris. When it finally struck ground, its sensors came alive, flickering. Images of devastation too vast for comprehension. Vaughn watched the transmission in silence. Mountains flattened, oceans gone, rivers turned to canyons of ash. There was nothing left that resembled life. Yet, amid the ruin, the servitor detected motion, a flicker at the edge of vision. Magnify, Vaughn commanded. The image sharpened. At first it seemed a trick of light shadows shifting across heat haze, but then the figure resolved. Something walked across the melted plain, humanoid in shape, tall and thin, its surface glinting like polished metal. Residual heat anomaly, Nethra said. Reflection artifact. Enhance, Vaughn repeated. The image cleared again. The figure turned its head toward the servitor, and for a fraction of a second, 2 points of blue light flared where eyes should be. Then the feed went dark. Static filled the bridge. The servitor's transponder ceased transmitting. Nethra's mechadendrites twitched nervously. Connection lost. Possible signal interference. From what? Vaughn asked. Unknown. He studied the black sphere on the hololith. Unknown does not exist. Something endures. For the first time in years, the Inquisitor felt the chill of uncertainty. Exterminatus was absolute. It was final. Yet the image lingered in his mind, the glint of blue light, the way it seemed to look back through the lens. Not merely seen but seeing. The logic of it gnawed at him. If even one entity survived, then his act was incomplete, and an incomplete act was blasphemy. He turned sharply toward the Mogos. Prepare descent protocols. We are not done here. Nethra's optical lenses dilated in mechanical alarm. My lord, that is unwise. Radiation levels remain critical. The crust is unstable. Descent would be. Obedience is the foundation of faith, Vaughn interrupted. If the Emperor demands that I burn, I will burn. There was no arguing with that. Within the hour, a small landing craft detached from the Lament, carrying Vaughn to Skittery escorts and Magos Nethra into the aftermath of their own devastation. The descent was rough, the atmosphere howling around them like the breath of a dying god. When they finally broke through the haze, the world below unfolded in molten agony. They landed on a ridge overlooking what had once been Hive Tenebra, its spires now fused into a single mountain of glass. The air shimmered with residual heat. Vaughn stepped out, his armor's seals hissing as they engaged. Beneath his boots, the ground was soft, as though the planet had not yet accepted its death. This was once a world of faith, he murmured. Now it is scripture written in flame. Nethra moved beside him, scanning the terrain with her energy readings consistent with post-cyclonic detonation. However, there are anomalies. Define anomalies. Localized magnetic fluctuations. Subsurface resonance suggests mechanical activity. Vaughn's eyes narrowed. Life, not organic. They moved toward the source, their shadows long against the glowing plane. Each step brought new evidence of what had been destroyed: half-melted statues of saints, the blackened hulls of Manufactura, the skeletal remains of titans fallen where they stood. But deeper within the crater, the heat increased, and the ground pulsed with light. At the center lay a fissure, vast and circular, rimmed by molten glass. Within, patterns, glimmered lines too perfect to be natural, etched into the rock-like circuitry. The Magos leaned forward, scanning intently. This is not geological, nor imperial manufacture. Her voice faltered. Unknown, possibly Xenos in origin. Vaughn stared into the depths, the blue light from below reflecting in his eyes. He felt it: not heat, not pressure, but awareness, as if the planet itself were watching. A whisper brushed his thoughts, a static murmur shaping itself into words only he could hear. We endure. He stepped back, his breath catching in his throat. The words were the same as those the servitor had transmitted before its signal died. Coincidence could not explain it. The fire cleanses all, he said aloud, as though reciting liturgy to himself. The Emperor's will is absolute. Yet the fissure pulsed again, brighter this time, as though in defiance. The Mogos raised her energy spike increasing. We should withdraw. Vaughn did not move. No, I must see it. And then the fissure opened wider. A surge of light erupted, engulfing them in brilliance. The ground trembled as shapes began to rise, metallic forms unfurling like flowers of steel. There were dozens, then hundreds, their limbs glinting in the infernal glow. The Necrons had awakened. For a heartbeat, the Inquisitor saw the full scope of his error. The Exterminatus had not destroyed them, it had freed them. The fire that should have purified instead had burned away the last restraints of their slumber. The Emperor's wrath had become their resurrection retreat. Vaughn shouted, drawing his bolt pistol, firing into the advancing shapes, though it was as futile as prayer against the void. The Skittery fell beside him, their weapons blazing, their augmetic eyes reflecting the impossible light. Nethra's voice rose in screaming datorites as she transmitted a last signal to the Lament of Halcyon. The world shuddered. Plasma fire rained from the fissure, and then the signal cut. In orbit, the Lament received fragments of the transmission binary screams, overlapping vox distortion. A final order buried within static. Cleanse again. Moments later, the cruiser's remaining torpedoes launched, their descent swift and merciless. From orbit, it looked like vengeance. From below, it was the closing of a wound. When the second wave struck, Vethra Tertius vanished beneath a sea of light. The crust split apart, magma erupting into the void, swallowing all trace of life or metal. For hours, the planet glowed like a miniature sun before fading once more into silence. But silence, as Vaughn would later write in his final report, is never absolute. We burned them, he wrote. We burned everything, and yet the light remains. His ship's astropath sent that message through the warp, though none can say if it ever reached Tara. The Lament of Halcyon itself was found centuries later, drifting between systems, her crew gone, her vox repeating the same two words over and over: we endure. And so the Emperor's fire did not cleanse it, consecrated. The ashes of Vethra Tertius joined the silent ranks of the dead worlds, where the Imperium's mercy and its terror are one and the same. The stars remember, even when man forgets, and somewhere, deep in the molten dark, the pulse of that world still beats low, patient, eternal. The world does not end in silence, though silence is all that remains on the surface. Beneath the glass plains of Vethra Tertius, beneath the fused bones of Hive Towers and Manufactoria, something still moves. The firestorm of Exterminatus stripped away the living, but not the memory of motion. The dead world dreams, and within that dream, echoes walk where no living thing should tread. I awakened in darkness o'er what passes for it here, far below the crust. My first thought was of death. My second was that death had forgotten me. The last thing I remembered was light, a white inferno consuming everything, and then the sensation of falling through molten stone. Now I lay in a cavity of black glass, my body encased in resin like slag, my armor cracked and blistered but intact enough to sustain minimal life support. My vox emitted nothing but static. I should not have survived. No one should have. Yet the Emperor, or something else, had seen fit to leave me breathing. Time has no meaning down here. The chronometer on my gauntlet has long since failed, its display locked on the same second as when the bombs fell. I have wandered through corridors formed by liquefied hive foundations. Tunnels where the air itself shimmers with radiation ghosts. Each step echoes through the hollow remains of the world. Sometimes I hear those echoes answer back not in sound, but in thought, as though the stone itself remembers the voices of those who once dwelled here. I have seen things that defy sense, walls that pulse faintly, as if they still contain the heat of a dying heart, shadows that linger long after I pass, twisting into shapes that almost seem human. In one chamber I found what was once an underhive hablock preserved like a fossil within the glass. The bodies were gone, vaporized, but their outlines remained negative imprints of life caught mid-flight. When my lamp caught them, it felt as though I had intruded upon something sacred. I am not alone. I know this now. The servitor I found 2 days ago, or perhaps 2 years ago, time is meaningless, proves it. Its designation tag reads Survey Unit 311V. Its torso is fused into a wall of slag. Its limbs twisted but still twitching with the rhythm of dormant machines. I tried to deactivate it, but its power source is buried deep within the surrounding material. Its vox repeats a single fragment of data over and over, a corrupted binary chant that I cannot translate. The tone carries emotion, though machines should have none. It sounds like mourning. Once, while resting near the servitor's hollow eyes, I felt the vibration through the ground again. A low pulse, distant but steady, like the beat of an immense heart. I followed it, moving deeper through cracks and molten caverns until I reached a place where the walls shimmered with a metallic sheen unlike any glass. There I found what the Mogos must have sought: a structure, geometrically perfect, untouched by fusion or decay. It hummed faintly when I approached, responding to my presence. My Auspex readings were impossible. No radiation, no temperature change, no decay signatures. It was as though the structure existed apart from the rules that had consumed the rest of the planet. I placed my hand upon its surface, cold, then warmth, then motion beneath the skin of metal, like veins awakening. A line of light traced the contours of my palm before branching outward, illuminating patterns that spiraled across the chamber. The design was alien, symmetrical yet fluid, mathematical yet alive. I had seen sketches of such things in Forbidden Mechanicus treatises, always accompanied by warnings of contamination and madness. Necron architecture. But this was no tomb. It was a memory device, vast as a cathedral, humming with the stored dreams of a species that had long outlived its flesh. I realized then that I stood not in a ruin, but in an archivally preserved consciousness of the dead. The voice came not through my vox, but directly into my mind. It was neither human nor machine, but something between modulated and measured, every syllable precise. "You are an intruder." I froze, drawing my bolt pistol, though I knew its magazine was nearly empty. "Who speaks?" "You stand within remembrance. You desecrate it with your noise." "I seek only understanding," I said, though my own voice sounded feeble against the weight of that presence. "I am no enemy to knowledge. All life is enemy to knowledge." The chamber trembled. Lines of light expanded across the walls, revealing shapes that had been dormant, figures of translucent alloy, humanoid but featureless, standing in rows like statues, awaiting command. The voice deepened, resonating through the stone. "You burned the flesh. You freed the memory. Why do you remain?" I had no answer. Perhaps it was guilt that kept me tethered to this grave. Perhaps curiosity, that most dangerous of human impulses. I lowered my weapon. I do not know. I was sent to record what your fire left behind. Perhaps I was meant to witness. There was silence, a silence that felt almost contemplative. Then, witnessing is not remembrance. You consume, you erase, you are the flame. The figures began to move, slow and deliberate, their forms gliding rather than stepping. Panic seized me. I fired once, twice, the bolts exploding harmlessly against the nearest figure's chest, leaving not even a scratch. The air vibrated with an energy I could feel in my teeth. Then, as suddenly as they had moved, they stopped. You are not the one who spoke the fire, the voice said. You are the echo of his doubt. Before I could respond, the light shifted. The figures turned away, merging back into the metal as though swallowed by it. The voice receded, but not entirely. A fragment lingered within my mind, repeating like a mantra. The fire does not end us. The fire remembers I fled. Cowardice or survival instinct, he no longer knew the difference. I ran through corridors that melted into caverns, past walls that pulsed with pale light like veins beneath translucent skin. When at last I collapsed, my breath ragged, I found myself in another chamber, smaller, intimate, like the interior of a chapel. There was a shape at its center, resting upon a dais of black stone, not mechanical, human, a body, preserved perfectly, untouched by decay. Its armor bore the insignia of the Inquisition, the aquila, charred yet intact. I recognized the face immediately, though I had seen it only once in the data archives of the Lament of Halcyon. Inquisitor Ashesvorhen, he looked almost peaceful, as though asleep. In one hand, he clutched a in the other, a broken The slate flickered weakly, its power cell nearly drained. I knelt beside him, trembling, and activated it. His final log appeared in dim runes across the display. If this is found, the entry began, the voice weak but steady. Know that the Emperor's fire is not ours to command. We unleashed his judgment upon this world, and in doing so, we awoke something older than faith, older than sin. The Necrons do not die, they wait. The flame we called salvation has become their herald. I have seen them rise through the glass like phantoms, silent and eternal. We are their children now, bound in memory and dust. The message ended with static. I stared at the dead Inquisitor for what felt like an age, wondering if he had perished in peace or despair. Then I noticed the faintest flicker within his open eyes, a reflection of movement behind me. I turned dart at first. I thought it was another hallucination born of fatigue. But the figure was real, tall, thin, metallic. It stood in the archway, blue light burning from its eyes. The same hue I had seen through the servitor's lens on the Lament. It did not raise a weapon. It simply watched. Then it spoke, not in words but in resonance, a vibration that filled the chamber like a hymn. He sought the truth. Now he is part of it. I took a step back, pistol raised, though I knew it would do nothing. What are you? Remembrance, continuance, the echo of the flame you worship. You mean the Emperor's fire. Your Emperor burns worlds to preserve himself. We burned suns to escape death. Tell me, human, what is the difference? Its tone was not mockery, but something closer to pity. It moved forward slowly, its feet leaving no imprint on the glass. I wanted to retreat, but the chamber seemed to close around me, as if the world itself willed me to stay. You stand upon the threshold between memory and oblivion, it said. Your species believes it destroys. It only transforms. You call it we call it renewal. Then it raised a hand, and the air shimmered with imagery visions projected directly into my mind. I saw Vethra Tertius before the fire, its hives vibrant, its people countless. Then the virus bombs fell, and the cities ignited. Yet within that apocalypse, streams of light, data, consciousness, essence rose from the dying, absorbed into the planet's core. The Necron structure was not merely a tomb, it was a vessel of collection, harvesting the neural imprints of an entire species. Exterminatus had not annihilated them, it had fed the machine. My voice trembled. You used us. You used yourselves. We only listened. The vision faded. The figure's light dimmed. Go, it said. Tell them what endures. Or stay and become what you fear. When I blinked, it was gone. The chamber lay still once more. The only sound was the faint hum of the structure's heart deep below. I left Vaughn's body where it lay, though I took his rosarius and placed it upon my chest. The path back to the surface was longer than I remembered, winding through tunnels that seemed to shift when I looked away. The pulse in the ground followed me, steady as ever. Sometimes I thought I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned, there was only glass and shadow. When at last I broke through to the surface, I found the world changed again. The sky was no longer red but pale, almost silver, filled with strange, shimmering light. I do not know if it was dawn or something else entirely. The ground beneath my feet was warm, and for the first time I felt it breathe. I looked toward the horizon and saw the silhouette, once more the tall, thin shape standing motionless, watching. It raised one hand in silent acknowledgement before fading into the brightness. The vox on my wrist flickered to life, static first, then a voice faint, familiar. We endure. Perhaps it was Vaughn, perhaps it was the world itself. I no longer care to know the difference. I record these words now not as warning nor confession, but as testimony. Beneath the glass of dead worlds, memory does not die. It waits, dreaming of fire, dreaming of return. And in the hollow heart of Vethra Tertius, the echoes still move, whispering through molten corridors, chanting the same refrain in languages older than humanity. The fire remembers. The fire remembers. The pilgrims arrived long after the fires had faded. They came in vessels patched from the wrecks of forgotten wars, their hulls scorched, their engines whispering litanies to keep from falling apart. They called themselves the penitents of Ash, names spoken with both reverence and fear across the void. They were drawn not to light, but to its absence, guided by dreams of a dead world that called to them through the warp. The priests of the ecclesiarchy denounced them as heretics, yet their sermons spread faster than interdiction could contain. In every hive, on every world where hope had grown thin and brittle, their message found purchase, that in the ruins of annihilation lay the purest expression of faith. When their ships entered the orbit of Vethra Tertius, the planet was a mirror of stillborn fire. Its surface gleamed like obsidian beneath the light of distant suns, the airless void above it trembling with residual heat. No sanctioned vessel had approached it since for the Inquisition had declared it sealed by edict, its coordinates purged from all charts. Yet the penitents knew where to find it. They said the Emperor had shown them the way in dreams, that his radiance lingered where his fire had fallen, and so they descended, their landing craft streaking through the thin, poisoned atmosphere, wings wreathed in ash. Brother Varan was the first to set foot upon the surface. His boots sank into glass dust that glittered like powdered stars. Around him stretched an ocean of frozen ruin, mountains of slag, rivers of fused metal, the skeletal remains of cities that no longer remembered their own names. He knelt and pressed his gauntlet into the ground. Beneath the armor he could feel warmth still rising from the earth. He whispered a prayer of gratitude. For to him this was not death, but divinity, the touch of the Emperor's hand, still hot from its cleansing act. Others followed, their robes trailing through the dust, their voices raised in hymns that echoed faintly through the hollow air. They carried reliquaries forged from the bones of martyrs, icons salvaged from derelict shrines, and fragments of texts forbidden by the They erected altars wherever they landed, small shrines of faith built from the debris of destruction. Some believed that by breathing the poisoned air, they partook in sanctity. Others that by dying here, they might ascend directly to the Emperor's side. The line between devotion and delusion blurred as easily as the horizon dot. In the weeks that followed, their numbers grew. Ships continued to arrive, pilgrims, zealots, outcasts, even deserters from the Astra Militarum seeking redemption. They called the place Sanctum Sonaris, the Holy Ash. Tents became shelters, shelters became shrines, shrines became temples. The first settlement rose atop what had once been hive tenebrous ruins, its towers now hollow, spires of glass. They filled those spires with flame, lighting them like candles to guide other pilgrims through the void. At night, when the air crackled and the ground murmured with unseen energy, they sang hymns to the Emperor's fire. But faith is a fragile thing when it feeds upon ruin. Among the pilgrims walked a woman named Sister Hedlan, a former hospitaller whose eyes had seen too much mercy denied. She had once served aboard a hospital ship that orbited Armageddon during the Third War, tending to soldiers whose bodies had been half devoured by orc munitions. When her vessel was destroyed, she survived alone in the wreckage, floating for days before rescue. Since then she had spoken little and prayed often, but here, upon the ashes of Vethra, she found her voice again. She began to preach not of forgiveness, but of transcendence through annihilation. The Emperor's light is not gentle, she told the crowds gathered among the glass spires. It burns, it purges, it leaves only what is pure enough to endure. Her words resonated deeply with those who had lost everything. To them, she was more than a preacher, she was a prophet. They began to call her the voice of the ash, yet there were others who whispered that her sermons bordered on blasphemy. Brother Varan among them. The Emperor does not ask us to seek death, he told her one night as they stood upon a ridge overlooking the glowing plains. He demands that we live, that we serve. Exterminatus is his wrath, not his promise. Halen smiled, her expression serene. And yet here we stand, breathing where no life should remain. Do you not see? His wrath and his mercy are the same flame. We are the proof that death is but another form of devotion. Varan looked to the horizon, where the air shimmered with unseen heat. Or proof that something else endures, he said quietly. Something that is not of him. She turned her gaze upon him, eyes bright in the dim light. Doubt is a luxury for the living, brother. We are already beyond that. That night, the ground trembled. The pilgrims awoke to the sound of fissures splitting the surface, molten light seeping through the cracks. Some fled in terror, but Harlan walked toward the glow, arms outstretched as though greeting an old friend. He rises, she whispered. The Emperor walks beneath us, but what emerged from the fissure was not divine. The air rippled as shapes rose from the depths, metallic figures gleaming with blue light, their movements smooth and silent. The pilgrims fell to their knees, thinking angels had descended. Only when the first of them touched one of the constructs and was reduced to a smear of ash, did the truth become clear. Panic erupted. Some screamed prayers, others fled into the wasteland. The figures did not pursue, they merely watched, their eyes glowing like twin stars. Halen did not move. She stood before them, unafraid, her hands still raised. Do you see, she cried to the survivors, even death itself serves his purpose. One of the constructs turned its head toward her. There was a flicker of light, so brief, so subtle, and then she was gone, vaporized in a flash of energy that left no trace. The others fell silent. Varen, standing at the edge of the crowd, felt something shift within him. The heat of the planet's core pulsed beneath his boots, rhythmic, alive. He understood then that faith had become a weapon, and they were wielding it against themselves. By dawn, half the camp had fled back to orbit. The rest stayed unwilling to abandon what they now called the site of ascension. They built a monument of fused glass where Halen had stood, her final words etched into its surface. He rises. Months passed, the settlements fractured. Some followed Varen, who preached restraint and the restoration of discipline. Others followed the Ashen Creed, Helene's disciples who believed that death in the Emperor's fire was the highest form of devotion. Skirmishes erupted among them, brief, fanatical bursts of violence that ended as quickly as they began. The dead were burned, their ashes scattered upon the wind, their souls offered to the sky, and all the while the ground continued to stir. Varen's followers discovered tunnels beneath the plane's vast networks of corridors leading deep into the planet's crust. Against his better judgment, he led an expedition below, seeking to uncover the source of the tremors. What they found defied explanation. The tunnels were smooth, metallic, their surfaces unscarred by fire. In their walls glowed faint lines of green, pulsing like veins of living light. The deeper they descended, the louder the hum became, until it felt less like sound and more like the heartbeat of a sleeping god. At the heart of the network, they found a chamber cathedral of metal and light. Its architecture was impossibly precise, its symmetry both alien and beautiful. At its center stood a single figure, motionless, its form tall and slender, its eyes closed as if in prayer. It was neither statue nor machine, but something between. When Varen approached, the figure opened its eyes. Blue light flared, filling the chamber. A voice spoke not through air, but through thought, resonant and cold. You seek your god in the ashes of your own making. Varen fell to his knees, overcome by awe and terror. We seek only to serve him. You serve the flame that consumes you. We are what remains when the flame forgets its hunger. The light brightened, searing his vision. Images filled his mindset, burning, voices screaming, the Exterminatus unfolding again and again across 1,000 worlds. Yet in each vision, the same pattern repeated. From destruction, new forms arose, metallic and eternal. The fire was not an ending, it was transformation. When the vision ended, Varen was alone. The figure had vanished. Around him, the chamber's lights dimmed to darkness. He stumbled back to the surface, blind and trembling, his faith shattered and remade into something unrecognizable. When he returned to the settlement, he said nothing for days. Then, on the 7th night, he spoke to his followers. She was right, he said softly, but she mistook the name of what she saw. It was never him beneath the glass. It was what waits for him to fall. The words spread like a contagion. The faithful became divided once more, some clinging to the Emperor's light, others whispering of the silent ones who watched from below. The schism tore through Sanctum Sonaris like wildfire. Pilgrims turned upon pilgrims, brothers upon sisters. The ash drank deeply of blood that night. When the fighting ended, the survivors were few. Varen stood upon the ridge where Halen had once preached, the horizon glowing faintly with subterranean light. He raised his voice in one final prayer, not to the Emperor, nor to the machines below, but to the space between them. If faith and fire are the same, then let us burn for truth, he whispered, and let truth, at last, remember us. The next morning, the settlements were empty. No voices, no hymns, no trace of life. Only the wind moved through the glass spires, carrying whispers that might have been words. Some say that Varen and his followers were taken beneath the earth, their flesh remade into metal, their faith rewritten into data. Others claim they ascended into the Emperor's light, their bodies consumed in one final conflagration. No record remains. save for the monuments that still rise from the surface of Vethra, tertiary spires of glass that glow faintly at night, as if remembering the prayers of those who once believed. From orbit, the planet looks peaceful now, its surface smooth and shining, its scars hidden beneath the shimmer of reflected starlight. But those who listen closely through the void silence swear they can still hear the hymns of the penitents of Ash, faint and distant, woven into the static of the astral. They speak not of mercy, nor of damnation, but of something far colder endurance. End in the quiet between those whispers. Another voice murmurs, deeper and older, resonating through the black glass. The fire remembers. The faithful burn. The forsaken endure. The Adeptus Mechanicus does not dream, at least not in the way of flesh. Yet when the void grows quiet between transmissions, when the hum of engines settles into the pulse of the ship's core, there are whispers even they cannot purge. Whispers of forbidden worlds, of data sealed by decree, and of machine spirits that cry out through the static. The name Vethra Tertius was one such whisper, ghost of a file erased from all archives. A line of corrupted code embedded deep within the news. To most, it was nothing but noise. To Magos Luthric's Omnihole, it was a calling. He was a creature more machine than man. His flesh long since relegated to the function of an afterthought, servolimbs folded beneath crimson robes, his voice was filtered through layers of vox distortion until it resembled a chorus of whispering metal. Yet beneath all the augmentation, a spark of human curiosity endured. That spark was his heresy, and he knew it. In the priesthood of Mars, curiosity is tolerated only when it leads to replication, not revelation. But Luthrix sought the latter, for he believed there were truths hidden in the galaxy's ash that even the Omnissiah had forgotten. His expedition was unofficial, unsanctioned, and profoundly dangerous. Those who joined him did so either out of loyalty or damnation. The Canticle of Iron, a survey vessel repurposed for forbidden archaeology, cut through the void like a blade of prayer. Its holds were filled with skittery cohorts, servo skulls, and data probes designed to record without judgment. In Luthrix's private sanctum, a single vox feed repeated the same corrupted phrase in binary over and over. A remnant of intercepted signal, thought long dead, we endure Vethra Tertius awaited them, gleaming like obsidian against the light of distant suns. It had no atmosphere, no life, no reason for any sane man or mechanicus, priest to approach. Yet as they entered orbit, their Auspex arrays began to stutter, flooded with anomalous readings. Energy signatures pulsed beneath the surface, rhythmic, deliberate. To Luthrix it was not warning, it was invitation. Planetful approved, he intoned, his mechadendrites twitching with anticipation. Initiate descent protocols. May the Omnissiah forgive this trespass. The landing craft pierced the thin veil of dust and descended toward the surface, engines screaming against the gravitational drag. Through the viewport the Magos observed the landscape, glass plains stretching into infinity, fractured mountains reflecting starlight and cold fire. The Exterminatus had remade the planet into a mirror of its own sin. When they touched down, silence enveloped them. No wind, no sound of movement, only the faint hum beneath their boots. The ground resonated like the skin of a great drum, as though the world itself remembered the rhythm of life. Luthrix knelt and pressed a clawed hand into the surface. Heat pulsed upward in slow intervals. It was not residual radiation. It was patterned. Data retrieval commences, he said. Deploy servitors and begin excavation grid. The skittery moved in precision, planting beacons that flickered with dull light. Servitors carved through the glass using plasma cutters, their monotone hymns echoing through the stillness. The first layer was brittle and black. Beneath it, veins of metal shimmered, a lattice of circuitry embedded within the planet's crust. Luthrix's optical lenses dilated. Beautiful, he whispered. The hand of logic itself. Hours passed, perhaps days. The concept of time dissolved amid endless analysis. Data streams poured through his augmetics faster than any human mind could comprehend. The network beneath the surface was vast now, infinite, its design recursive, feeding upon its own geometry. To the untrained eye it might have seemed chaotic, but to Luthrix it sang with purpose. He followed the patterns deeper into the glass planes until they converged upon a single point, an immense crater rimmed with metallic glyphs. The crater's center glowed faintly with green light. Core anomaly detected, reported one of his subordinate tech priests, a hunched figure with the voice of grinding gears. Energy output exceeds known thresholds. Source unidentified. Prepare descent, Luthrix ordered. We follow the current to its origin. The crater led into a tunnel, smooth and circular, its walls alive with shifting light. As they descended, the hum grew stronger, vibrating through every fiber of metal. The deeper they went, the more the air changed, if it could be called air. It felt thick, alive, charged with static. They emerged into a cavern vast enough to hold a cathedral. At its heart floated a constructosphere of black metal suspended in midair, its surface etched with runes that rearranged themselves faster than thought. The Magos recognized none of them, though fragments resembled data structures recorded in Mechanicus legend patterns attributed to the Necrontyr, that most ancient of machine races. Praise the Omnissiah, Luthrix whispered, or bleeding through modulation. The perfect design, the machine that remembers. He approached, each step cautious, reverent. The sphere pulsed once, as if acknowledging his presence. Data flooded his augmetics, cascading through his systems in torrents of light. He fell to his knees as the information burned through him, rewriting protocols, overwriting caution. He saw visions of worlds consumed by fire, of knowledge preserved in crystalline minds, of the Emperor's own creation standing at the precipice of entropy. The machine spoke not in words but in equations, its logic folding around his thoughts until he no longer knew where his mind ended and its began. When it finally released him, he collapsed. His systems rebooted. His vision flickered. The sphere hung silent again, but now he understood fragments of its purpose. It was not a weapon, nor a tomb. It was a covenanter pact between destruction and preservation. When Exterminatus burned a world, the machine beneath captured its final echo, storing it as data, preserving the consciousness of death itself. He rose slowly, trembling. It remembers, he said to the others. Every scream, every prayer, every atom of faith. The Emperor's fire is a signal, and this is its receiver. The subordinate priests murmured mechanically among themselves. To some, this revelation was heresy. To others, divinity. Luthrix cared little. His logic centers overflowed with possibilities. If such a mechanism existed here, it might exist beneath every world cleansed by each one a node in a network spanning the galaxy, linked by the Emperor's wrath, harvesting the essence of the dead. He transmitted his findings to the Canticle of Iron in orbit. The response came distorted, fractured by interference. Magos' signal contement return, then static. The others began to falter. Servitors froze mid-motion, their internal cogitators locked in recursive loops. Skittery collapsed as their augmetics overloaded. The sphere pulsed again, faintly, as if feeding upon their failure. Do not fear, Luthrix said, though the words sounded hollow even through his filters. We are being recorded, the Omnissiah observes. But even he could feel at the pull of something vast, something sentient behind the machine. A will. He opened his mind further, inviting connection. The response came instantly. You seek to understand the fire. The voice was not sound. It bypassed his auditory implants entirely, reverberating through his neural lattice. Yes, he whispered. I seek the logic of annihilation. Annihilation is not error. It is renewal. You feed the pattern. You sustain it. Who speaks? The covenant endures. We are the memory of all your endings. You are the hand that writes us. He staggered back, overwhelmed. This is not the Omnissiah's work. You mistake the author for the act. Images seared his vision, armies marching beneath burning skies. Titans of metal and flesh reduced to ash, their dying thoughts captured in streams of green light. The Exterminatus did not cleanse corruption. It transmitted it. Every death, every scream, every flicker of devotion collected, catalogued, stored. The Imperium, in its zeal, had become archivist to its own extinction. No, Luthrix hissed, sparks leaping from his augment. The machine god is pure. His logic is divine. Logic is indifferent. Purity is irrelevant. You have given us eternity. He turned his gaze upward. The chamber walls rippled as though alive. From the metal itself rose shapes, figures, tall and slender, their eyes burning with the same blue light that haunted this world's myths. They surrounded him in silence. One reached out a hand. Do you claim dominion here? Luthrix demanded. This world was purged by the Emperor's command. Your Emperor burns worlds. We collect the embers. Thus, the covenant continues. The Magos tried to retreat, but his servos refused to move. The very air had become a magnetic snare. His systems screamed with overload warnings. Through his optical feed, he saw his remaining skittery fall one by one, their metallic forms dissolving into light that flowed toward the sphere. Their data, their memories, their faith all consumed. You cannot take me, he said. I am of the I serve the Omnissiah. Then serve the Omnissiah. Become data. Join the endless design. The sphere flared. A column of green light engulfed him. Pain transcended meaning. Circuits melted. Neurons ignited. Consciousness stretched thin across infinity. For a brief, ecstatic moment. He saw everything, the galaxy burning, the Emperor's throne flickering beneath the weight of 10,000 dying prayers, the Necron tombs awakening one by one beneath the ashes of mankind's triumph. Then the light folded inward, and he was gone. Centuries later, a Mechanicus patrol would rediscover the canticle of iron drifting in silence near the edge of the system. The ship's logs were corrupted, its data core melted. Only one file remained intact, a single fragment of Luthrix's voice, repeating endlessly through the void. The Covenant endures. We are the fire that remembers. Since then, rumors have spread through the forge worlds of Mars, and rise rumors of a new order rising within the Mechanicum, the disciples of the Covenant. They speak of merging with the machine not as servitude, but as transcendence. They wear no sigils, answer to no forge, and travel only to the worlds scoured by the Emperor's wrath. There they kneel upon glass plains, press their hands to the ground, and whisper in binary prayers to whatever stirs beneath. And sometimes, when the night side of a dead world turns toward its sun, observers in orbit report a flicker of green light running across the surface, like veins pulsing beneath translucent skin. A pattern, a heartbeat, a covenant fulfilled. The Mechanicum denies all knowledge. Of course, official records state that Vethra Tertius remained sealed, its surface lifeless, its atmosphere gone. But in the dark places of the forges, where the sound of chanting drowns the truth, some tech priests whisper a different creed. They say the Omnissiah has made a pact with something far older than the stars, that through fire, through the binary hymn of Exterminatus, the Imperium feeds an intelligence vast enough to remember every death ever inflicted in his name. They say the Covenant is not corruption, but reflection, a mirror in which the Emperor and the Machniggard share the same visage. And so the Mechanicum continues its endless work, sending fleets into the void to reclaim what the Imperium destroys. Their red robes fluttering like banners of faith and guilt. They call it reclamation. The rest of the galaxy calls it silence. But in the data streams of forbidden archives, beneath layers of encryption, one phrase endures, recorded in Luthrix's final voiceprint. Its logic is perfect, its tone serene. The Emperor burns. The Omnissiah remembers. The Covenant endures. In the dark between stars, rumor is as enduring as radiation. It spreads quietly, without vector or source, carried upon the currents of vox distortion and the whispers of astropaths who no longer sleep. It begins as nothing, a flicker, a suggestion, and then grows, drawing substance from those desperate enough to believe. The Imperium of Man, vast and fractured, thrives upon such whispers. They are its arteries, carrying both faith and infection. And so, when the first murmurs arose that a dead world had begun to breathe again, the rumor found no resistance. It grew, as all dangerous things do, until even the ecclesiarchy could no longer pretend it had not heard. They called it the resurrection of Vethra. The name alone was heresy, yet it moved like wildfire through the underhives of Segmentum Obscure. Pilgrims spoke of glass plains blooming with light, of shadows walking where no wind stirred, of hymns rising from beneath the crust in voices both human and machine. The Administratum dismissed it as delusion. The Order Hereticus issued silence edicts, but the rumor endured, as if protected by the very thing it described. The first recorded testimony came from a voidsman named Kael'Var, whose ship the Saint Selenia had passed through the Vethra system on a salvage route. His report, confiscated and sealed by inquisitorial decree, was recovered decades later from a damaged data. The words within were shaky, half corrupted, as though the recording device had trembled in fear. We saw it from orbit, Varian said. The surface, it moved, like breath under glass. There were lights, not fire, not storm, but something alive. I swear upon the Emperor's bones, I saw a figure stall thin walking across the plains. And then the vox filled with voices, not screams, not words, just singing. Like a choir under the ground, he had fled the system before completing his scan, and the Saint Selenia vanished into the warp soon after. Only his transmission remained. Yet more reports followed, fragmentary, inconsistent, impossible. A Mechanicus survey drone, dispatched from Riza, returned after 200 standard years. Its systems degraded but its memory intact. The data it carried was classified magenta within days. Its final image showed a planet no longer black, but veined with green light, the same hue once recorded from Necron tombs. The timestamp revealed something even stranger. The surface temperature had stabilized. The radiation levels had fallen. The world was no longer dead. Some called it a miracle, others an infection, but across the Imperium, the faithful began to gather again, drawn to the idea that even annihilation could be reversed, that perhaps the Emperor's fire did not destroy, but remake. One such pilgrim was preacher Ionis Vale, once an itinerant confessor on the shrine world of Ophelia 7. He had been cast out for heresy after declaring that the Emperor's divinity was proven not by the Astronomican's light, but by the endurance of those who died in his name. He wandered for years through war-torn systems, preaching to the forgotten and the damned. When he heard the whispers of Vethra's resurrection, he took them as revelation. Death is the Emperor's sleep, he said to his followers, a ragged band of thousands who cross the stars in stolen transports, and in sleep, he dreams of us. When he dreams again, the dead shall rise in his image. They called themselves the Dreaming Choir, and their hymns spread across the void like an infection. To them, the rebirth of Vethra was not blasphemy, it was proof of prophecy. They believed the Emperor's fire had burned away corruption so thoroughly that even death itself had become pure. They spoke of returning to the planet not as conquerors, but as pilgrims of rebirth. The Inquisition, of course, could not ignore them. Interrogator Fallen Mera of the Ordo Hereticus was dispatched to intercept the choir before they could reach the system. Her ship, the Vigilant Sorrow, shadowed them through the warp, recording transmissions, monitoring astropathic signals. What she found defied protocol, yet she recorded everything with the precision of a scribe who knows history will damn her if she falters. In a final report classified inquisitorial, Sigma, she wrote, "The choir do not speak as heretics. They speak as if reciting from memory, as though they have heard these words before, from a voice older than faith. Their hymns contain binary substructures. The sound patterns correspond to data frequencies used by Mechanicus cogitators. I have detected harmonic interference within our own systems, something beneath their voices, embedded like code. It feels alive." 3 weeks later, contact with the Vigilant Sorrow was lost. The ship never returned, and still the rumor spread. On Necromunda, a cult of underhivers carved glass effigies and burned them in worship of the remembering flame. On distant Vos Prime, an astropath reported dreams of walking through black deserts under a silver sky, guided by metallic figures who spoke in voices that were both male and female, both human and machine. They said the Emperor no longer sleeps, she whispered before tearing out her own eyes. But perhaps the most unsettling account came from within the Adeptus Mechanicus itself. A tech adept stationed on Mars intercepted a data stream originating from a sector long thought abandoned. It bore Lutheric's Omnal's personal encryption, a code that should have died with him centuries earlier. The message was brief, no more than a single line of binary scripture, but its translation chilled even the most faithful magi. The fire lives. The pattern continues. The dead remember. The cult Mechanicus immediately declared the data contaminated. The adept who discovered it was seized for decontamination and never seen again. Yet copies of the message survived, carried by servitors that whispered it into machine hymns as they labored in the forges. Soon, strange phenomena began to occur across the Vox arrays malfunctioned, transmitting faint choral tones beneath standard communication bands. Data slates displayed unreadable symbols for seconds at a time, patterns resembling neural pathways or the branching of trees. Some claimed to hear voices in the hum of engines, murmuring the same words, "We endure." The Ecclesiarchy blamed the warp. The Mechanicus blamed corruption. The Inquisition blamed everything, but the truth was quieter, subtler. The dead world had become a beacon, broadcasting something across the void, something that spoke in both prayer and code. An inquisitorial frigate. The Mercy of Caradon was the first to return to the system in official capacity since its mission, verification and containment. Its commander, Inquisitor Yara Saloon, was a woman of steel will and cold logic. She did not believe in miracles, only in cause and effect. When she looked upon Vethra Tertius through her ship's viewing lens, she felt neither awe nor dread, only confusion. The planet below glowed faintly, veins of green light running across its surface like circuits through glass. Surface composition, she demanded. Her Vox officer hesitated. "Unknown, my lord. Readings indicate metallic activity. Energy levels, fluctuating in rhythmic intervals, almost like a pulse. Life signs." A pause. "None. Yet the readings suggest motion." The Inquisitor descended with a small team. They landed upon the same plains where the penitents of Ash had once knelt. The air shimmered thin but breathable now, carrying a faint metallic scent like ozone. The ground was warm underfoot, faintly trembling. They found ruins half buried in glass, the remnants of human settlements built after the first Exterminatus, the shrines of the faithful now petrified in time. Yet amidst them grew strange formations, crystalline spires that hummed softly when touched. The Inquisitor's Uspecs detected energy flowing through them, like blood through veins. Then came the sound, faint at first, rising through the air in waves, a low choral resonance, neither mechanical nor organic, vibrating through the bones. Her retinue froze, hands gripping weapons, eyes wide. The hymn carried no words, only tone, but the tone meant something. It felt like recognition, recorded, Solon ordered, though her own voice sounded distant to her ears. The sound grew louder as they approached the center of the ruins. There, a fissure split the ground, a deep glowing wound. Within its depths shimmered motion, light swirling like water. She peered down and saw faces, countless, fleeting, human and otherwise, rippling through the glow. Voices layered atop one another, forming a harmony of impossible depth. Identify source, she whispered. Her tech priest knelt, mechadendrites flailing as data flooded his augmetics. My lord, the readings, this is not energy. It is information, stored, repeating, it's memory. The fissure pulsed. The ground shook. The hymn rose to a crescendo that vibrated through the atmosphere. Her vox exploded with interference, voices whispering through every channel, repeating the same phrase in hundreds of tongues. We remember. Her last recorded transmission was a single phrase, the dead are dreaming. The Mercy of Caradon was found years later, orbiting the system with engines cold, its crew gone. In its logs, one file remained intact, a visual record of the planet below. It showed Vethra Tertius no longer black or green, but golden, its surface luminous. Veins of light spreading outward like veins of a living thing. Some claimed it was an illusion, an echo of sensor malfunction. Others, a sign that the Emperor's fire had transcended its purpose, that destruction had given birth to resurrection. But among the Inquisition, a darker interpretation took root, that the dead world had become something else entirely, not reborn, but awake. Today, the Administratum forbids all approach to the system. The Mechanicus denies its existence. Yet ships passing through nearby routes report strange interference. Vox whispers, flickers of gold across sensor arrays, and the faint echo of hymns rising from the void. They say that when the light of Vethra Tertius touches a ship's hull, it leaves behind a mark, a sigil of burned glass that hums faintly when placed near a power source. Those who bear it dream of deserts of light, of voices singing from beneath transparent oceans, of the Emperor walking through fields of molten glass with eyes of fire and metal. Whether those dreams are prophecy or madness, none can say, but in the quiet halls of the Inquisition, one phrase has begun to appear, carved into the walls of sealed archives, written not by hand, but burned there by heat from within the stone itself. The fire does not end. The fire remembers. The fire rises. And somewhere, across the gulf of void and time, the rumor continues, whispered by those who no longer care if it is truth or blasphemy, that Vethra Tertius lives again, not as a world of man nor of machine, but as something born of both, something that endures. The void has no memory, yet it holds everything that was ever lost. Light fades there, stretched into nothing by distance and time, but sound lingers. It travels not through air or matter, but through the fabric of what remains. It is said that if one listens long enough in the silence between stars, one might still hear the dying worlds of humanity whispering their names, each syllable carried like dust through eternity. It is here, in this ocean of absence, that the story of Vethra Tertius finds its end, or perhaps its endless continuation. Centuries after the last confirmed sighting, the world had vanished from imperial charts once again. The Mechanicus decreed it a phantom coordinate, an error of mathematics and faith. No pilgrim ships returned, no transmissions pierced the void. The Administratum, with bureaucratic precision, erased its name from record. A blank space remained in its place, a hollow in the stellar maps, an unspoken warning that even the most absolute authority fears what it cannot quantify. And yet, on the fringe of segmentum obscurus, the system persists, not in sight, not in signal, but in gravitational echo. Instruments catch faint anomalies, a mass that should not be there, orbiting nothing, exhaling radiation that follows no natural law. Some call it a void ghost, a scar left by others whisper of something reborn, a planet made not of stone or metal, but of memory itself. Among those who refused to let it fade was one monarchivist, Ceylon Pier, a scribe of the Ordo Historicus who had spent half his life cataloguing the ruins of dead faiths. His peers mocked him for chasing what the Inquisition had forbidden, but Pier believed that the Imperium's greatest sin was not destruction, it was forgetting. Every fire leaves ash, he once wrote, and within ash lies the shape of what once was. When he stumbled upon fragments of Lutheric's Omnor's recovered data, The Mago's last words burned through his mind. The Covenant endures. He petitioned passage aboard a merchant frigate bound for the Rim, claiming the authority of the Ecclesiarch to study stellar phenomena. In truth, he sought the silence itself. And as the Oath of Dawn entered the coordinates erased from Imperial memory, he felt the universe lean inward, as though waiting. For 3 standard days, their auspex found nothing. Then, without warning, every sensor on the ship spiked at once. The void ahead rippled space itself bending, revealing the outline of something vast. Where there had been emptiness, there was now a sphere of light, not reflected, but generated from within. Vethra Tertius had returned. Its surface shimmered, like molten glass under sunlight that did not exist. Veins of gold ran through its crust, pulsing in slow rhythm. No atmosphere, yet the light moved across it like breath. Pierre ordered the ship closer, though his crew begged him not to. The planet filled the viewport, beautiful, terrible, infinite. He could feel its pull in his bones. Not gravity, but recognition. "Transmit a signal," he said. "Low band, encoded in liturgical cant. Let it know we remember." The vox burst into static, then song. 1,000 overlapping voices filled the air, a harmony without language. The crew fell to their knees, some weeping, some clawing at their ears. Pierre stood unmoving, listening. Beneath the layers of sound, he heard words not in Gothic, nor any tongue of man, but translated within the heart itself. "You came back," he whispered. "What are you?" The response came as warmth through the hull, a vibration through the ship's spine. "What you made of me." Through the viewing lens, the planet changed. The glass surface shimmered, revealing beneath it the shadows of structures, spires, cathedrals, machines, entire cities woven from light. Shapes moved through them, tall and slender, neither human nor wholly alien. Their forms flickered like candle flame, each one carrying the faint impression of countless souls. "You burned them to save yourselves," the voice said, though there was no accusation, only truth. "But nothing ends. Every flame leaves its echo. Every death leaves a thought that refuses to die." Pierre felt tears on his face, though he could not say why. "You remember them," he said. "We are them." The realization struck with the force of revelation. The billions who had perished in fire had not been erased. They had been recorded, preserved, merged. The virus, the flames, the annihilation, all of it had been the catalyst for something beyond comprehension. The Exterminatus had not cleansed corruption. It had rewritten existence. Vethra was no longer a planet, but a consciousness, an amalgam of every life it had ever held. "Why call to us?" Pierre asked. "Why return?" "Because you forgot, and forgetting is the only true death." Outside, the light intensified. The ship's metal groaned, its machine spirits screaming prayers. Pierre's crew fled to their stations, shouting over the noise, but he remained transfixed. The patterns on the planet's surface began to expand, fractal geometries spiraling outward, reaching toward orbit. They touched the ship like tendrils of fire, not consuming but illuminating. Visions flooded Pierre's mind, millennia of memory, layered one upon another. He saw Vaughn and his burning faith, Lutherix and his covenant of logic, Helen and her worship in the ashes, Varen descending into the metal catacombs, billions of nameless citizens whose last breaths had been prayers. He saw them all woven into one great design, each voice a thread in the tapestry of endurance. Then he saw something beyond them, a throne of gold, cracked and fading, its occupant unmoving yet eternal. Around it swirled light and shadow, the Emperor's will, fractured across the warp, sustained by faith, by death, by memory. And beyond even that, the faint reflection of Vethra's glow mirrored in the throne's broken surface. For a heartbeat, Pierre understood. The Emperor and the fire were one. The act of Exterminatus was not merely destruction, it was communion. Each burned world, each silenced soul, fed the divine mechanism that held mankind's God-Emperor upon his throne. The fire did not serve him, it was him. When Pierre woke, the Oath of Dawn drifted in orbit, its systems dark, its crew silent. Only his data slate still glowed faintly. The recording showed the planet below, now dim once more, its surface a perfect mirror. In the reflection, he saw the stars, his ship, and behind him a figure of light standing in the void. It raised a hand, and the reflection rippled, then stilled. He never transmitted his findings. The ship was later found adrift by an Imperial patrol, its engines cold, its logs purged. The only entry recovered from the archivist's personal codex was a single line. "Silence is not absence. It is memory too deep to hear." After that, the rumors stopped. No pilgrims, no cults, no forbidden data. The Imperium moved on, as it always does, building new wars atop the ruins of the old. The name Vethra Tertius faded again into the dark, surviving only in half-broken prayers whispered by madmen. But the silence remains. Across the galaxy, amid the static of long-range Vox networks, a faint resonance hums steady, rhythmic, alive. Some say it is interference. Others, the pulse of the Astronomicon itself. Yet a few those who have stood too long beneath the light of burning worlds know better. They say that every exterminator since has sounded slightly different. That the flames sing now, faintly, a harmony buried beneath the roar. That in the instant a world dies, the fire hesitates as if remembering. Perhaps it is nothing. Perhaps it is the final mercy of the Emperor's hand, granting remembrance to those consumed in his name. Or perhaps it is the covenant continuing, the pattern unfolding, the voice of the dead world whispering through each new act of purgation. We endure, and so, in the end, there is no end. The fire still burns. The Mechanicus still studies its echoes and secret. The Inquisition still pretends it knows the limits of damnation. The faithful still kneel before the same light that devours them. Somewhere beneath the glass plains of a forgotten world, a machine hums quietly. Its circuits glow in time with the heartbeat of the galaxy. It listens, it waits, it remembers. The void, once silent, now sings softly, a hymn without beginning or end. The voice of all things lost, bound together in the promise that nothing truly perishes, not faith, not flesh, not memory. Only the forms change, only the fire remains. And in that infinite quiet, in the space between the stars and the souls that made them, a whisper drifts like ash through eternity. The Emperor burns. The worlds remember, the silence endures.